Now joining us here from FreedomFest for another Mangru one-on-one is the president of Euro-Pacific Capital. He's also a candidate for United States Senate, Peter Schiff. Peter, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program.
Great to be with you live this time.
Peter, I want to talk about one of the things that you're speaking about at FreedomFest, and it's about abolishing the Fed. It's something that's been brought up in the Congress, but a lot of people don't know, what does abolishing the Fed or even auditing the Fed do?
Yeah, you know, I'm not actually in favor of abolishing the Fed just yet because I'm afraid of what we might replace it with. You know, if we just take the printing press away from Ben Bernanke and give it to Nancy Pelosi, you know, they're probably going to use it even more recklessly. What I think the key is now is to restore the independence that the Fed has lost. The Fed is now simply a tool of the politicians. It's an engine for inflation. They simply monetize government debt. We need a Federal Reserve that's independent, that will raise interest rates when they need to be up, even if it means that the recession gets worse before it gets better. And we need to have a central bank that takes the punch bowl away instead of spikes it and doesn't monetize this debt. You know, you have Alan Greenspan now who's criticizing government deficits, yet he facilitated them. If he had some backbone, if instead of slashing interest rates to 1% like he did in 2001 and 2002 and providing the fuel for the housing bubble, if he had kept them high and allowed the markets to unwind the imbalances that were created during the tech bubble, we never would have had the financial crisis. So, you know, and we wouldn't have these huge deficits that he's now criticizing. So the Fed is very complacent in this because it takes the two to tango, the government to borrow the money and then the Fed to print it.
Now, when you look, you know, we think of FreedomFest, the first word is freedom. And a lot of people, when they think of freedom, they think about the freedom of speech, the right to practice whatever religion that they want. But yet, when you look at today's society, where, you know, right now, individuals, Americans, taxpayers have to cover the debts that they never agreed to cover. When you look at taxpayers that don't have access to credit, that aren't able to operate in a, you know, capitalistic financial system, the question is, are we truly free?
Not really. I don't feel very free. And you know what freedom is? It's freedom from government. It's to be left alone to make your own decisions about how to live your life. And unfortunately, we have a culture in Washington that wants to make those decisions for us because they think they know best. They think they know how resources should be allocated. They don't want the market to do it. They think they know which technologies need to be funded, which businesses need to be propped up, and which need to fail. I don't want bureaucrats making those decisions. I don't want them making them for me personally, or I don't want them making them for the economy. You know, every time we've had that centralist government planning mentality, whether it was in the Soviet Union or whether in Cuba, it doesn't work. And it's not going to work any better if we try it.
Now, as we see countries around the world, whether it's Greece going into you know, downward spiral, whether it's Spain that's now looking to go into downward spiral, we're seeing a flock to the U.S. dollar, and more people are buying U.S. treasuries, and that's enabled the U.S. to go further and further into debt. Do you believe because the U.S. is relatively better off than the rest of the world that we'll continue to be able to sell debt because we're relatively better off than the rest of these countries?
I don't think we're relatively better off. There is a perception that the dollar is safer, but that perception is not true. But as long as it's there, we do benefit from the flight capital of other countries that actually have smaller problems than we do. We are the world's biggest debtor. We owe more than all the other nations of the world combined. You know, our debt to GDP is about 90% now, but that doesn't count all the off-budget items like the $6 trillion that we're on the hook for Freddie and Fannie. It doesn't count all the unfunded liabilities for Medicare and Social Security. And if you look at our GDP, it's only a tiny fraction of it, maybe it's 15% or so, is manufacturing. You know, if you look at our debt relative to the wealth-producing capacity of our economy, it's enormous because so much of our GDP is consumption, and all that is financed by debt. And when the debt goes up, the consumption collapses. And remember, look at the nature of that debt. It's all short term. The government isn't borrowing with 30-year notes, bills, or bonds. It's borrowing with T-bills. It's making the same mistake that the subprime borrower made when he bought a condo using a teaser rate. We've got a teaser rate on the national debt. What happens if interest rates go to 5% or 10% or 15%? How are we going to make those payments? We can't.
Peter Schiff, president of Euro-Pacific Capital and current United States Senate candidate in Connecticut. Peter, great to have you here on the show in person, and all the best of luck to you on the race.
Thanks, and look forward to being on your show again, and good luck with it.